Welcome to What's What with Heather Harris, the podcast for the fiercely hopeful. Here, we explore the lesser-known innovations, overlooked ideas, and hidden forces quietly shaping our human experience. I'm your host, Heather Harris. Let's find out what's what. Today, we're turning our gaze skyward and inward as we explore how the ancient spiritual practice of astrology continues to guide us toward healing and meaning in a chaotic modern world. The language of the stars has long offered humanity something profound: perspective, comfort, and connection. Long before apps tracked our moods or algorithms predicted our desires, people looked to the heavens to understand their place in the cosmos. Astrology helped our ancestors make sense of change, uncertainty, and the unseen threads weaving lives together. Maybe in this anxious and accelerated age, that's exactly what we're missing: that sacred pause, a moment to breathe, to listen, to ask not what's next, but what really matters. According to a report published earlier this year, nearly 30% of Americans consult astrology, tarot cards, or other divinatory practices or practitioners. And in some nations, almost half of the population engages in these practices. I've invited Lady Samantha, astrologer and author, to join me today. She's a gifted interpreter of the celestial story and a modern guide through the mysteries of astrology. We're going to explore today how these ancient arts can serve as tools for healing, transformation, and hope in 2025 and beyond. We'll also take a look ahead with the help of Lady Samantha's astrological predictions for the coming years and what the skies might be revealing about humanity's collective path forward. Sometimes it may be the oldest ways of seeking meaning that still have the most to teach us about finding hope right now. Let's begin. How would you describe astrology for those who might be new to the practice or who may only be familiar with it by reading their daily horoscope?
That is a wonderful question. I think that astrology is best described as a relationship with quality of time. So right now, when we think of our relationship with science or the universe, it's quantified, right? We're looking for measurements. But somewhere in history, we stopped looking at the qualities of information and how that information can be organized based on their symbolic representation. So this is a little bit of a complicated answer, but when I first start teaching any new student, I tell them that we are relating to time in a different way. And we're relating to it from the perspective of each individual person. So you are the center of your universe in the same way that the Earth revolves around the sun and the sun is the center of our solar system. So astrology makes each individual feel more special and seen because it takes the approach that we see through our own life, which is that you are at the center of your world, and it can connect you into that organizing power around you.
Okay, wow. I don't think I've ever heard of it described that way. And it's such an interesting thing to think about. When we do live in such a society where we have to quantify everything, everything has to be proven by fact, by figures, the qualities of our relationship with the universe.
Exactly. And it wasn't only until recently, and when I say recently, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of years, where astrology, astronomy, mathematics, and even medicine divided.
Right.
So these things were together. We looked for patterns existing around us to inform us about what was happening in our physical body and in our relationships and in our emotional body and in the political world as well. So it's only recently that astronomers, especially if I just take astrology and astronomy in terms of the actual study of the cosmos, where those two things branched into separate conversations with maybe more, people that are scientists no longer, or they discount the qualitative, symbolic, archetypal, mythological components that have shaped the stories of our lives.
Shape the stories of our lives. Yeah, because as you say, astrology has been practiced for millennia. It has been a part of understanding our own context in the larger world, or even our smaller social worlds, but also in the universe. Now it's exploded on
Mm-hmm.
social media, online, on TikTok memes. There's readers who film themselves online. Why do you think it continues to resonate so powerfully in our modern world? What do you think it says about what people are needing or craving right now?
I think there are cycles to these things as well, where people are more receptive or open to metaphysical studies or astrology in general. And I think I would go back to my first, like how I answered your first question, to um, explain the movement in some way,
Hmm.
because there's so many humans on this planet, and there's so many people within even our cities or your small community or the area of the city that you live in, where, especially in today's world where we are detaching from each other, you might not know or even say hi to the person that lives on the same floor as you.
Yeah.
And so we are increasingly made to feel insignificant, right? People are dying over there in the world. Do those lives matter? Does your life matter?
Yeah.
And when we turn to faith, or we turn to something that can give us a sense of order or perspective, that your life means something and that there is a governing power or an organizational principle, it can make you feel seen. And astrology is different than other, I grouped it into metaphysical practices, but that really is incorrect in some way, because we are researchers, and you don't have to be an intuitive or anything like that to do this research.
Okay.
So when we are studying charts and just studying for a couple of weeks, you're just lifting, the front page of this book in terms of telling the story of humanity that then you can apply and learn through your own chart. So what gets people hooked is how deliberate and specific the chart can be, the more and more that you actually learn. Unfortunately, social media, TikTok, YouTube, all of these things, they can present, as more and more adoption happens on a surface level, a simplicity to the practice that might turn off other people, whether they're academics or astronomers, because it can appear like a trend or faddy or really simplistic, or that we're categorizing people into large groups that represent certain characteristics. But this is actually so far from the truth of what the astrological practice can provide you, which is a very in-depth analysis that has no end in sight
Hmm.
of research into the self and the patterns of how all of these archetypal principles work together to create the individual.
Right. And as you say, there's no end in time because things are evolving over time. There are cycles with the planetary movements
Right.
and
Activating
that
the
sort of thing.
chart. Yes.
Something you can go back into and re-examine, re-explore certain aspects
Hmm.
that may come out at any given time.
And the astrological chart, let's say, for example, your birth chart, there are so many different ways to look at it. And because right now, how information is shared, there's texts that are currently being unlocked in terms of different astrological practices from certain traditions that we only recently, let's say in the last 20 years, have gotten access to. And because of the dissemination of information in our new technological age and our access to astrological programs that, you know, 20 years ago, we don't have the same level of programs. So you have to understand how to use a protractor and how to calculate degrees. And many people wouldn't be equipped for that.
Including myself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And myself. So it is the length of research that you can do now and the new techniques that you're able to learn as we uncover more and more information in history. It makes this practice so deep. And even though I've been practicing for about 15 years, I still feel in some ways in certain areas always like a student,
Right.
because so it's not just that the chart unfolds as we age through time, but there are so many ways to view the practice, and it is so, endless in some ways as well, the different
Ever
techniques that can be
evolving.
used. Hmm.
Ever evolving, just like the universe itself. So, what are the biggest misconceptions that people might have about astrology, or what do you wish that people understood more clearly about it? Maybe we've touched on some of those things already.
I would say that the biggest misconception is when people mock or simplify, or they don't know a lot about astrology. They think that, how could I have all the traits of my sun sign? Or let's say they find out their moon sign. And so because there is the importance on time, the time of birth of the individual is the most important thing. Because if
Okay.
you're born, let's say it's Scorpio season right now, if you're born when the sun is in Scorpio, there are 30 days that the sun is in Scorpio. That is not super specific to you.
No.
There are 2.5 days where the moon traverses through a sign. So every 2.5 days, the moon moves into a different sign. The moon rules our emotional needs, sense of belonging, and automatic reactions to things. So, how you do those things based on your time of birth is going to be through that sign. So, it becomes a little bit more specific about your inner nature. However, if we look to the eastern horizon at the moment of your birth, everything is rising and then setting over the western horizon. So basically, the sky completely rotates 360 degrees around you, not just the sun, the whole sky, every single planet, right? The zodiac belt moves with it.
Hmm.
So the most specific part of you is where those things are relative to that 24-hour cycle. So if someone doesn't have their time of birth, and sometimes it's really important down to the few minute mark,
Hmm.
we don't know where in the sky those things are. And that eastern horizon, that is going to change roughly every 2 hours. So now we have a more specific element that is going to dictate this pattern or this map that is going to be represented in your birth chart. That is going to show me, regardless of the sign, where everything falls, because a sun way up here is going to be different than a sun way down there that, it's in the middle of the night.
Yeah, you can actually drill down very specifically into, is it the traits that we are born with that are reflected in in the sky at the time of our birth, or does it move beyond sort of our inner personality traits? What else can it dictate?
So basically, if we look at the natal chart, it's divided into 12 sections. We call them places or houses. And it could be your career or where you come to prominence versus who you are at home, the types of partnership lessons versus who you are and how you present yourself. Everything is in the chart, not just you, your body, your habitual behaviors. Yes, but also the people that you attract, your children are in it, your relationship to the world, how your reputation, your hidden enemies, your accountant is in your chart. The whole thing is in it. The microcosm of your life relative to the universal backdrop is your natal chart. So you can extract from that chart not only personal characteristics, but also characteristics of the partners that you attract, or the children that you'll have, or the bosses that you'll relate with.
So that's far more detailed than reading, I'm a Cancer, sun sign Cancer, my horoscope in, the daily newspaper. It can really drill down into all aspects of your life.
Yes, we just need the time of birth, the date, and the location.
So it feels that we are now living in a time of great change for many reasons. How can the planetary movements invite us to understand our own individual roles to play in this era of uncertainty? It's a big question, but
Well, if you're seeing an astrologer, the astrologer will pull your natal chart and they will take a look at the planets that are currently moving in the sky and see how they are relating with your specific map or blueprint and what they might be activating. There are very strong, unprecedented alignments that have planted their feet and are going to continue to do so in 2026 through to early into the next decade, where there's a lot of change on the collective. Now, some of this collective change is hitting people personally in their certain areas of their life. So it feels like a lot of personal life changes as well, especially, if you have early degrees of cardinal signs, for example, those people are already starting to feel it. So if your sun, for example, which is in Cancer, if it is at 1 or 2 degrees in your birth chart, then you would be one of the candidates that would be feeling some substantial growth, especially starting this past summer and into 2026. So some of the general things that are not going to sound new right now is, for example, Saturn dipped its toe into its new sign at the end of May, Aries. Saturn changes sign every 2.5 years and tends to bring social themes, especially around government leaders, regulation, control. Now, it was in the sign of Pisces before, and now it's moving into the sign of Aries. And so certain themes with Saturn and Aries is around personal accountability. So we can see already in 2025, the government starting to crawl back. And this, anytime I bring up anything political, I am saying it from 100% of a non-biased political viewpoint. So from the outside, we have seen a crawl back on policies that are inclusive, policies that support marginalized people, and re-implemented merit-based systems. Okay.
Interesting.
For example, now we've definitely seen this in the States, but for example, the school board here in Toronto, in Canada, they created a lottery system a few years ago for specialized art programs for high school. Okay. So before it's you make a portfolio and you apply based on your portfolio. So to be more fair, while Saturn was in Pisces, and look at people that might not have had the opportunity to have art lessons when they're young or things like that, they created a lottery system in general. So literally, when Saturn entered Aries, that lottery system has been revoked now, and the merit-based system has gone back in. So Saturn in Aries is Aries is very much about me. It's very much about who can do the best, who's going to win the war, and it can be a show of strength in some way. And so these slower moving planets, and this is just one example, it's a 2.5-year cycle through a sign. They affect us all from a government or a regulatory, we have to function within those containers in some way.
Right.
So we would be looking in your personal chart to see, okay, how is this affecting this person? Here's another misconception is that, oh, you're this sign, you're not that sign. We are all signs because the entire sky is around you, which means the entire zodiac belt. So you have in your wheel every sign somewhere, regardless if you have planets in it or not.
Okay. That's going to be new for a lot of people to hear. I
Yeah.
think.
So
Yeah.
most people have probably seen maybe not their chart, but maybe a chart in general. So that wheel on the outside, they can think of it like the cosmic belt around that divides the sky into equal 30-degree pieces, 12 zodiac signs based on the ecliptic, which is the path of the sun through the sky. So you have in each area of your life one of those signs governing it, regardless where the planets are. But where that wheel is, where those signs govern is going to be based on the most specific part of you, which is the time of birth.
Okay. So that's critically important. If you're really going to fully do a deep dive into how your personal chart interacts with what's happening in the moment, you're going to
Exactly.
really need that piece of information.
Yes.
Okay. So we have touched on a couple of examples of how our current sky is impacting particularly government and control and merit-based systems gaining more, I guess, the more of the center stage.
Mm-hmm.
So astrology really does offer us a map, not only for ourselves, but as the collective, as you've said. So when we look forward to, you said early 2030s, can you tell us a little bit about what's reflected there for the human journey as a whole? And is there potential for, and I'm sure there always is, but a potential for healing and renewal?
Well, as I'm sure you're already aware, there is a huge technological movement. And so, from a more simple understanding of the transits first, this is going to be unavoidable in some way. So, in 2026, there's an aspect, it is between Uranus and Pluto, that the last time this aspect occurred was in 1920 and 21.
Okay.
So what happened in 1920 and 21 is a huge adoption period in terms of automobiles, refrigerators in your home, electricity in your home. These things were invented before that, but everyone started to adopt it really fast in that period. So a very fast technological adoption.
Okay.
Which kicked off the roaring 20s before the crash in 1929. So that is the last time that we had the aspect that is occurring in 2000, that starts in 2026 and is going to go on for a few years.
Okay.
So you can't really talk about 2032 until you see the speed of change. Now, back in 1920, there were the Luddites who refused to bring electricity into their homes. They refused to drive cars. So there was pushback. So we can see the stage already being set since 2000, like since COVID, basically, of a new technological wave of innovation from quantum computing, AI, robotics, aerospace, space engineering, space mining, digital currencies, the banking system changing. Everything is moving and it's going to pick up pace. We saw that pace change drastically in 2025, and that pace is going to further change. So information is becoming more and more and more accessible to us as well in this process. That the adoption of the internet, if we go back over the last 20 years, was way slower than the adoption of the things that I just mentioned because they stack on top of pre-existing technologies.
Right.
So, from a point of healing, growth, development, we're at a critical age in humanity in terms of our intellectual capacity to solve issues, whether it's medical, build our new businesses, create efficiency in our life, and I don't want to say fix, but find new solutions, maybe through the help of technological advancements to improve how you currently operate.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Right. So, um, life is speeding up in some way in terms of what is possible and what is not possible. And so in 2032, the planet Saturn, which brings regulation, structure, a foundation, is going to meet up with Uranus in a Saturn-Uranus conjunction that will start another 40 to 45 year cycle. They do that every 40 to 45 year cycles, that I think is really going to anchor all of these things into a new type of paradigm.
Do you think we're going to see, you made a comparison with 1920, 21 when these planets were related in this aspect. Do you foresee the kind of tipping point that we saw in 1929, or is that something that's not necessarily something you can predict?
So history, it doesn't repeat in the same way because we have that one aspect, but then we also have in 2026 a 36-year cycle starting, that the last time was in 1989, which was during major revolutions that usually have to do with control. And so the economy is very unstable right now. If I bring up the markets and the economy right now, and if you have been watching it for the past couple of years, we've been the growth of the Mag 7 has been growing at quite fast rate, producing returns that are unnatural. And so you have people like Warren Buffett pulling their money out and holding 50% in cash because they're calling this overvalued. So 1929, we saw a huge crash. The dot-com bubble, during the rise of the internet, we saw a huge crash.
Yeah.
Are we due for a huge crash? Yes, we're due for a huge crash. Is that going to happen? There are different parameters this time. But astrologers in general are highly concerned over the next 2 years around what is going to happen with this speed of this adoption. Right? And how people are going to support each other. Because if banking is changing, if AI is coming in at a fast rate that it's replacing people, at that time period in 1920, it was the blacksmiths, it was the people that taxied people around by horse. It was farmers as new machines came in that wouldn't move over. But because of the adoption rate in terms of the potential impacts to anyone that works in information technology, and whether that is unregulated jobs are the first easy to replace, and then it's the ones that are regulated by governments, the scope of potential disruption and people's uprising or reaction to that is going to be based on these signatures quite volatile. So we might see things where the government puts in more structures to support people that have lost their jobs or whatnot, but that remains to be seen.
It does remain to be seen, but I can tell you, I mean, you just have to watch the news on a daily basis, and all of this makes very good sense. And I think in some of us, probably in many of us, we're all sort of struggling to absorb the latest news, whether it's AI or whatever it is, the technology wave that is about to, or is maybe coming over us now, and how we're going to adapt ourselves individually to
Right.
these greater societal changes. It's going to be an interesting time.
And the thing that I would say, the theme of the next couple of years is what is each person going to do for themselves?
Okay.
So, and it doesn't mean that you're not taking care of people around you, but it is up to us individually how we are going to be flexible and take into account your own personal security and that of your family as changes happen around you. If we are resistant to changes and don't think outside the box about what are other things I could be doing that contribute in this new forming society, or is my job potentially one that's going to be on the chopping block? Maybe I need to think about that and also go back to school. I'm 50 years old, but I need to have other skill sets.
Mm-hmm.
That is part of the overarching theme that I'm seeing in terms of we all are being asked to take more risks and
Okay.
be personally accountable. So it's less passive. We had outer planets in passive signs. Neptune was in Pisces, which for 14 years, now it's moving into Aries, which is you got to fight the battle. You got to initiate. You have to take the lead. Saturn was in Pisces for 2.5 years. Now it's moving into Aries. Personal accountability. No one else is going to do it but you.
Mm-hmm.
Pluto moved into Aquarius in 2023. And Uranus is moving to Gemini. So we're moving into fire and air energies
Okay.
away from water and earth energies. Water and earth are yin signs that think of water and earth, they fall down, right?
Mm-hmm.
It goes inward, and it's passive. So it's more, let's wait and see. Instead of, can you get ahead of this? We're not quite sure where things will land, but what's the most educated guess? Maybe I should do a little bit of this. Maybe I should try this. Let's see where this lands.
So there's more preparation. We can be more prepared, invest in more preparation in ourselves, whether it's education or just thinking forward how we're going to adapt and be flexible. Stay open. But I guess the
Mhm.
key word is this is going to be a time of action. It doesn't have to be, something really outward and
No.
external, but action within even our own sphere of influence, our own families, and our own selves.
Right. If I use the same analogy, fire, goes up, air goes up, they are considered masculine yang elements. So this is outward in terms of energy, action oriented, making decisions. And what some of my clients, what I say to them is, we don't need to know what the right decision is. But if you never make any decision, you won't even know what to correct or what you failed upon,
Right. So
right? If
that
you're,
goes back to the risk taking. You really
yes,
have to just move forward, take a step forward,
yes,
even if you don't know if it's the right
yeah,
one.
with as much education as possible, right? An educated decision, an educated leap.
Yeah. Well, it sounds kind of exciting to me, to be totally honest. I mean, I'm a bit of a lover of change because I always think that's where growth is, that's where possibility is. I know that people are afraid of this new paradigm, this new technological time of innovation. Um, but we can kind of flip that on its head a little bit in light of this time of action, that
Mm-hmm.
we can actually, move in a different but potentially very positive direction if we're
Yes.
prepared.
I think that it is great for entrepreneurship. There is much more technological resources available to people. I'm sure even yourself with like, how do I get a podcast up? How do I figure out how to do this? We can get access to the information to do those things a lot easier. You can chat GPT, they'll just give you a step-by-step guide to what
It's the
camera do you
best.
need, all the things that
Yeah.
you need. So in terms of starting your own business, I think it's easier to do those things right now. And from a spiritual perspective, we had a huge spiritual revolution for the last 15 years in terms of people opening to different spiritual practices, whether it's breath work or crystals, or there was a huge opening. Do I think that's going to continue? I think it's going to be very different.
Okay, how so?
I came into this industry in 2000, like I was a yoga teacher in the early 2000s. And then I was in the metaphysical world since 2007. So when I started being in the metaphysical world, it was very niche,
Hmm.
right? It was odd, it was weird, it was eccentric. When Neptune came into Pisces, 2000 and the second decade, we have a huge movement of popularity and social culture around metaphysical practices, whether it's, yoga or crystals or meditation. And now that Neptune is leaving and entering Aries, I do see some potential, like that's stalling out in some
Oh,
way. These things
really?
becoming, yeah, and it doesn't mean that people are going to be stopping their practices and no longer interested. But in the same way, I think that these things can't be just spiritual practices over here. It's about integration into being a human. So it's not, oh, I'm spiritual and I'm doing these things and I'm going to these retreats over here. There is that theme of kind of what does it mean to be a human? What does it mean to be active, action oriented, and integrative is how I think spiritual movements are going to um, permeate through the rest of the decade.
Oh, that's so interesting. And I think that also too has is very positive as well, because it isn't something that should be on the fringe or a sector or something that you separate out in your life to give time and attention to. It's to be a spiritual person is really, in my mind, to integrate all aspects of your humanity, right?
Right.
Whether you're at work or you're with your family
Exactly.
or in any
Yeah.
any situation. So that's really good insight.
I think that's the difference. Mhm.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good insight. So I have to bring this up because I just love it. You published a book, The Planets in Me, Astrology for the Wild Child.
Mhm.
Why do you think this is an important subject for children to be introduced to?
I wrote that during COVID, and I really wanted to bring something forward that was really light and gave, parents an option to read to their child at bedtime. a story that described the planets through the lens of taking ownership for my Mercury does this, and this is what it means to me, and it represents my, the sounds that I make and the thoughts that I feel, to without putting so much attention behind astrology from, oh, you have to believe in this to share it with your kids. This is fun, it's light, and it gives children another way to express themselves and see how everything is connected.
Yeah. And interpret their environments. I think,
Yes.
especially for children, adults as well. So you have long studied and contemplated the arc of the stars and the cycles they trace through our lives. What has been the greatest gift this work has given you?
I would say that it allows me to zoom out and study being a human in a way that separates me maybe from my biases. And I find this, especially right now, so nourishing when we are existing right now in a very polarized world,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's religiously or politically, that divides, people and families and based on which, what do you believe in and whatnot. And so it allows me to kind of zoom out and look at human behavior in general, which I find so fascinating because there are cycles of human behavior throughout history that repeats as well, in terms of we see polarization during times where the rich are getting richer, for example, and the middle class and poor are being hollowed out. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very fascinating to me to be able to even look at emotional reactions around me, in the people that are in my family, friends, and see a narrative that is much bigger than each individual person and myself. So from my own perspective, it allows me to be less involved sometimes in or analyze my own value systems based on biases, that I can go, okay, this is what I'm a product of, this is where I'm currently experiencing. So I don't know if compassion is the right word for all people, but more as to see everything more from a neutral standpoint that
Right.
lacks any sort of judgment, whether someone has completely different religious or political beliefs than maybe what I grew up into.
That is a real gift. I think that's something that's very, very difficult to achieve these days. That level of perspective and understanding without being swayed by all the political or religious or whatever the belief system is that is dividing people. And there are so many right now.
Right. Yes.
So that offers a level of peace in your perspective and also an opportunity to look at your own potential sort of
Yeah.
embedded biases.
Yeah, I would like to share one more example personally about how useful that is. Everyone's relationship with their emotions is different. And sometimes you'll hear people say, okay, well, this feeling is coming up, so we need to deal with it. Is it a true feeling? Is it giving you information that is intuitive? And from an astrological perspective, it's very complicated. And in some charts, for example, the emotional nature might come from a place in the chart that is actually self-sabotaging. So I might recommend to a client that they really refrain until the emotion has passed from sharing it or making assumptions from those emotions that could have a detrimental impact maybe on the people around them.
Right.
Whereas in somebody else's chart, their emotional nature might come from a place that is really informing them of truth.
Right.
And so there's no blanket, let's say in the self-help world, there's no blanket statement that would make sense astrologically around how someone should deal with their emotional nature and how they should also share it in partnership. Because from an astrological perspective, it's very specific to each individual. And so for the person that their emotions maybe come from a place that undermines them in some way or gives them even false information, because the emotions that come up can be so automatic, or we can't control the feelings that arise, right? They come from a subconscious place. And so what is so fascinating in astrology, and it doesn't mean don't honor or be introspective on your feelings if this was the case, but then at least if we know where they're coming from, people don't always make the assumption that this is true for you, or it needs to be validated in this particular way. So I usually recommend in that case, hey, wait till this passes. You need to gain some perspective first on why those feelings have come up, because they're coming from a place that actually is not as helpful in the chart. Yeah, I'm not sure if that makes sense, but
it does. It does make sense, because to have that knowledge about yourself, because sometimes emotions are overwhelming. We can't piece apart what is necessarily, when we're in it, what is accurate, what needs to be validated, as you say, what needs to be acted upon. So if there is an understanding from an astrological point of view that we just need to sit in it and observe it, let it pass, and then, because if we did act on it, it may not be as helpful. That is something that is a real gift. This has been a fascinating conversation. I have to tell you, I could talk to you for days. I think I need to have my chart done. I might be reaching out to you afterward to have a look at it. So I'm really grateful that you were here with us, Lady Samantha. How can our listeners find your work, follow you?
You can reach me through therockstore.ca. You can book me through there. You can also book me through ladysamantha.com. It's the same schedule, same offerings. All of my classes that I teach right now, you have to register through the Rockstore. And I also have a private membership club that you will find links for through either of those sites. Okay.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I'm going to put all the links in our show notes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you so much. And I hope you will come back. Thank you for joining me on What's What with Heather Harris. If you enjoyed this conversation, please follow, rate, and share the show. It helps others find their way here, because the more the merrier. The future is something that we influence and imagine together. I'm Heather Harris, and until next time, stay curious and stay fiercely hopeful.